Question 1. Who is Emmanuel Levinas? Emmanuel Levinas was a French philosopher of Lithuanian ancestry who was known for his work related to Jewish philosophy, phenomenology, existentialism, ethics, and ontology. Levinas's own philosophy began to emerge after the Second World War. His family in Lithuania were murdered in the Holocaust, while he, by then a French citizen and soldier, did forced labor as a prisoner of war in Germany. His wife and daughter were hidden in a French monastery. The Second World War shaped the way Levinas understood good, evil, man's free will, and God's involvement in the world. Question 2. What is God's role in suffering? Prior to the Second World War, theodicy was common in Jewish religious thought. Theodicy is the idea that God's actions can be explained or justified because God is seen as all-powerful, all-good, and all-knowing. In other words, there is reason for suffering. People who were not religious and believed in the Western modern Enlightenment idea of progress also believed there was a purpose to suffering. If you believed in the idea of human progress, it was easy to dismiss that all war and suffering as just steps in making a better, more just world. After the horrors of the Second World War, and specifically of the Shoah, the idea of theodicy and human progress were seriously challenged. Levinas wrote that the concept of theodicy should have never been accepted in the first place. He rejected the notion of theodicy and said it was not an acceptable way for people to explain human suffering. Before the Shoah, when tragedies were smaller, we were able to find justification or meaning for suffering. It was easy to fool ourselves into believing the concept of theodicy. Question 3. What is suffering? Levinas believed that theodicy was an easy way for people to comfort themselves when they learned about other human suffering. It provided a rationalized explanation to why bad things happen to good people. Isn't it God's plan? With the advent of the Shoah and its massive suffering on the part of blameless and innocent people, theodicy was no longer possible. God could no longer be used as someone we could turn to in order to save us. Suffering is not atonement for sin. There is no point to it, nor is there any justification for it, especially living in a disordered world where good does not triumph. Nothing can justify the suffering of others. Suffering, in itself, is useless. Question 4. How do we respond to suffering? When you see a person suffering, you take on the other person's suffering by engaging in compassion. You are there with the other person. You do not remove or justify their suffering. You do not excuse it, nor do you imply that it may have some purpose. You are there and present for them. As a religious, mature, responsible human being, you must obey God's commandments, keep the Torah, be ethical, and live through your own conscience. God's real active presence is not in the world. We embrace His laws and avoid the comforts of a mystical view of God. He will not save us. He is not there for us, nor will things all work out in the end. We must act ethically. We will do and we will hear. Question 5. What is the meaning of suffering to Levinas? The meaning of suffering is in the opportunity for the other to respond to that suffering, to embrace the sufferer, and, through doing so, bring God into the world. Suffering is meaningless for the sufferer. It only holds meaning when considering the perspective of the observer. The only meaning for suffering is the redemptive power it may have for the person who may bear witness to that suffering. Indeed, our responsiveness to suffering may be our only means of redemption. When we respond to the other at a time of need, we fulfill our humanity and can find existential meaning in life.